Are you someone who is into podcasts? Perhaps you want to have a really cool library where you can find some great podcasts to listen to on your commute to work. Or maybe you're looking to create one yourself. Well, let me tell you about Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast, all right? It's free. It has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your PC. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you. Complete ease, hassle-free, so that way you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as many more outlets. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Okay, folks? Everything you need to make a podcast in one place. It's fantastic. All right? And if you want to get started right now, all you got to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome back, everybody. Terry here once again with another fantastic episode of Just a Glimpse here just for you. And this time around, I'm going to dive into some story time, a little bit of personal life once again. I know how much you all enjoyed my very first episode of Who Am I? So let's go in and cover another topic that has to do with my personal life, like I just said. I'm sitting here thinking about what I wanted to do, and I got it. So I didn't do a poll at all this week, just because I was like, you know what? I am going to do this particular topic. And you're like, okay, Terry, you got some suspense right now. What is the topic you chose? And it's going to be roommates. All right, roommates. Some of you out there may have some really good positive stories, with roommates, things, success stories. All right, I'm not one of them. All right, now I'm going to go into my personal experiences with roommates. I've had roommates on 2 separate occasions, and they were both nightmares. The first time I had roommates was when I had to go to college. Now, for those of you, I grew up in Wisconsin, and when it was time for me to go to college, I ended up going to Illinois. So I went out of state to a school called IADT, the International Academy of Design and Technology. They had just opened a brand new location in Schaumburg, Illinois. So I ended up traveling down there so I could go to school, so I could do my whole thing with interior design and what have you. Being that I was from out of state, I didn't have family or anyone nearby to, just be able to commute to school or whatever, like most people did. So I had to sign up for roommates within the school. So what happened was the school had a deal with one of the big apartment companies in the area, called Versailles. Now, for those of you who live in Chicagoland, you're going to be like, oh, okay, I know who, you're going to be familiar with Versailles. I think it's like Versailles on the Lake or Versailles something or other. So anyways, they have some really, really nice apartments in Schaumburg. And I'm talking like nice. Like when I came down there as, this 18-year-old kid, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get this apartment. I'm going to have roommates. I was thinking, okay, the school's going to be, someone on a budget, but it's going to be nice and livable stuff, but it's not going to be like over the top, right? Oh my goodness. The apartments were beautiful. I'll never forget. So I go down to the school and I have to sign up to get roommates, and so I can get into the housing situation, because otherwise either you had to provide your own housing, either you lived with family or you had your own place already, or if you don't, you could sign up and they would put you in Versailles in a room with some roommates. And that was it. And students there were cut a deal on their rent. The rent was cheaper for students coming from the school versus other occupants that were staying at those apartments. So we had a special renting agreement, so we would have our rent at a lower rate, which was pretty sweet. Anyways, I go see the guy that's in charge of making sure that we have a place to live, basically the housing guy. And so I go and I talk to him. I can't remember offhand, I think his name was Manesh, but he was a really nice guy. So I go and I talk to him, I'm like, okay, hey, I'm from out of state. I need a place to stay. I'll sign up for that. And so I signed up to do all that. And so I'm not going to know who my roommates are until, I move in or whatever. And beforehand, he draws out the rules saying, okay, you know, this is where everybody's going to be staying. You know, you're not allowed to have any underage drinking or this or that and the other thing. All your basic rules, because, you know, the school doesn't want to be held liable for anything. I go and we do move-in day. I go and I get, you know, I have all my stuff. I'm ready to move in, and I get introduced to my very first roommates. And there's going to be 4 of us staying in this apartment. They already have it already set up, and it's already pre-furnished. It doesn't have everything, but it has, you know, things that you would need. So it comes with a full dining table and chairs. It already had like the sofas and chairs in there, and it came with beds. And so we move in, and everything's going pretty smooth. Everyone's acting pretty friendly. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to be so bad. My roommates seem pretty cool. This is going to be great. You know, we're going to be going to the same school together, and everything's looking good. Now, they had different programs in the school, and being able to design school, myself and one of the roommate, I believe her name might have been was Tanya, I think. Her and I were both in the interior design program. And then the other 2 roommates, I don't remember their names. I really, really wish I could. Like I said, I had 2 bedrooms. So, and each bedroom had two beds in it. So they put 4 girls in this apartment. So it was me, and I had 2 roommates. They were both in the fashion design. When we decided who we were going to be in the different rooms, they decided, since they were both fashion, they would stay in a room together, and we were both interior design. We would stay in a room together. This way, if we needed help or whatever when it came to like school things, we wouldn't have to worry about disrupting others if we had to go between different rooms or something. Whatever. So I was like, I didn't care. I was like, whatever. Just point me in the direction of where I'm sleeping, and I'm good. We get all settled in, we get moved in or whatever. Everybody's really, really nice and friendly. We, you know, hang out. We're trying to get to know each other. Everything's pretty positive. They draw up some rules. They're like, okay. So the 2 girls that were in the other rooms, I wish I could remember what their names were. I think the one girl, her name, I think, started with the letter D. It was a name it wasn't a common name, at least not to me. I can't remember what her name was. And the other girl, I think her name started with an M or something. So I don't know. So anyways, we'll just say D and M were in one room together. And then it would have been myself and Tanya in the other room. And D and M are like, yo, we're going to have rules. No one is, only we are allowed in this bedroom. No one else is allowed in here. And I'm like, okay, fine. If you want your personal space, fine. It's your whatever. And they said that includes the bathroom too. Now, their side had like a hallway, whereas mine didn't. So you would walk in, you had like the main entryway for the apartment, right? And that would lead into the living space. Okay? And on the left of the living space was a tiny little hallway which led to the 1 bedroom, and then there was a tiny little hallway which then took them to their bathroom. And then on the right side of the living space was my bedroom that had the attached bathroom. So there was no hallway for mine. My bathroom was attached to my bedroom. And then the kitchen and dining area were attached to the living space on the opposite side. I didn't really care too much. Like, okay, fine. You guys want to have your bedroom and your bathroom completely off limits to everybody else? Fine, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to care. I have no reason to go use their bathroom when I have one attached to my bedroom. So I didn't care. So we started going to school and doing our thing, and everyone's getting along, and it's great. And then the first negative interaction I had with them was... Actually, before I even get to that, so when we moved in, we ended up bringing a lot of our own things. Now, Tanya, she brought her own PC. So she had like the whole desktop PC thing that set up that she had. And she brought her own like stereo system, which is fine. So she had that on her side of the room. I brought movies. I had a lot of DVDs, and I brought the DVD player. I had my Xbox 360, and I brought a TV. And they insisted that I put my TV in the living room so that way it could be, for everybody to use. And I was like, oh, okay. So I put my TV in the living room. None of them had a TV. And D and M, they just brought like their clothes and like their regular stuff. They didn't bring anything extra, like electronic wise, between like TVs and computers or anything like that. I think they might have had a laptop. I think they each had their own like laptop, and that was it. I can't remember offhand though, but that, in the end, that doesn't really matter. So this kind of will go into a story later on. So I brought the TV, which they had me set up in the living room, and so I in turn put all my DVDs out there so that way we could, they can watch movies or whatever they want. And I had a really good collection. Back then you had like those really big towers where you would put your movies, like those little DVD movie tower things. And I think the one I had held over like at least 100 DVD cases. So I had one of those. They had a decent selection of movies to pick from. So very quickly, I end up bringing over a friend that I made in class named Kim. Now, she was in the fashion program as well, but we had some gen eds together. That's how I met her. Anyway, she wanted to come over and she wanted to check out the place. We were going to hang out, maybe do a little homework and just kill a little bit of time. So I bring her over and I give her the grand old tour so she can get an idea of, where I live, where things are. So if she needs to find something while she's visiting, she can, and there won't be any of those awkward moments where she would have to ask where she, where the bathroom is or something. So she can just have the tour. So I'm showing her around, and she's really, really liking the place. It looks really cool. And so we show the living room and my room and the kitchen and everything, and then we go into the hallway, and we don't go into their room, but I just say, hey, that's D&M's room and their bathroom area. We're not going to go in there, but this is their little area, and to finalize the tour. And at that moment when I was doing all this, D&M were indeed in their bedroom, so they knew I was giving a tour, and and they acknowledged us. They even said hi. They were super friendly about towards everybody while this took place, and that was like the end of the tour. We went and we hung out, did our thing, and everything seemed fine. So after Kim leaves that evening, the girls come up to me. Now, when I say the girls come up to me, I'm pretty sure, I think it was just D&M, because Tanya wasn't home, if I recall. I recall she wasn't there. But D&M came up to me having a problem with me giving Kim a tour of the apartment, saying that I was out of line and that I had no business going into their room. And I'm like, I never set foot in your room. We were in a hallway. We were in the hallway. And they're like, no, the hallway counts as part of our room. And I'm like, how in the hell are you going to claim a hallway as part of your room? It's a flippin' hallway. But whatever. So they were being territorial and upset that I had invaded their personal space, I guess. I guess a hallway constitutes as part of their room. Fine, whatever. So I got agitated. I got agitated because they were claiming it as, their space, and they didn't want me over there or whatever. And this later goes into how, so the three girls end up becoming really, really chummy and friendly. So it ends up being, the three of them end up becoming really good friends, and for whatever reason, they end up alienating me. Like, I kind of kept to myself, and I made sure to be very, very polite, and I let them use all my stuff. I didn't mention that I was the one that brought, like, plates and, like, pots and pans and, like, cooking things. I brought that stuff as well. So they were using pretty much all my stuff. Later on, M later on, she ends up buying some plates too, and she ends up adding them to everything within the kitchen, so that we all are sharing. So they have access to all my pots and pans, all my, like, utensils. They have access to my plates and my TV and my movies. So basically, they're using all my stuff. I'm giving them free access to all my stuff, and I'm not saying anything to them about them using my stuff. Okay, I'm being absolutely polite, and I'm sharing. They have an issue with me going in their hallway. Fine, whatever. I don't go back in their hallway. And when Kim comes over, we stick to the bedroom. It got to the point where I didn't even spend time in the living room, because I didn't feel comfortable sitting in the living room, because they were always acting like it was their space too. And they were always, watching movies or whatever and hanging out in the living room, so I just let them do their thing. Better to just, try to keep the peace than to, create friction. So if they kind of claim the living room as their little gathering area, which is fine. And I stayed in the bedroom, and then if I had friends come over, we hung out in the bedroom and just kind of chilled. Like, we would just sit on my bed and we would just hang out and talk and do homework or whatever we had to do. Or if we needed to, we would use the dining table to do homework if we had to do like any big projects or anything. We hung out in the kitchen, our dining area, which was fine. So that was my first little, issue with them getting some friction with. I wasn't allowed in their hallway. Later on, I end up making pancakes for breakfast one morning, and I had to get to school. I was starting to run late. I wasn't late, but I didn't want to run late, so I had some leftovers. So I went ahead and I put my leftovers in the fridge, and I figured, when I come back from school, I can eat them later as for my dinner or whatever. And I figured it'd be no big deal. I come home, and then I end up eating them or whatever. And then the next morning, the girls come up to me again, and they're like, "You shouldn't leave your food in the fridge. It's disgusting." And I'm like, "That's what a refrigerator's for. You put your food in it." And they had a huge problem. They're like, "No, you do not put leftovers in the refrigerator. It's disgusting. And that's how you get mold and bacteria and things in the refrigerator is by having food in there. We keep our drinks in there and like our ingredients to make food, but you don't put actual food in there. No, you don't do that. It's wrong." I was like, "Okay, fine, whatever. I won't put my leftovers in the refrigerator. Fine. I'll make sure that I only use the refrigerator for milk and eggs and butter and nothing else. Gotcha. Fine." So I made sure that whenever I made something, that I finished it, and I never again put leftovers in the refrigerator, because, oh my God, that's too much. So that was the next issue I had with them. They're just over the freaking top. Then another time, so the place was starting to get kind of dusty, and so I wanted to do some cleaning. The girls were all out. They were all doing in classes, right? So I was just me. I was the only one there. Anyways, I had the apartment to myself, and I thought, you know what? To be nice, I would help out, and I would do some cleaning around the house, right? So I go and I clean the bedroom, and I stick to my half. I don't go into Tanya's side of her room. I just, tidy up things in my side, and I clean our bathroom because it's a shared bathroom, so I clean my entire bathroom. I go and I dust around, I do all the dusting in the living room, and I clean, I clean the dining table and the kitchen counters and the stove and the microwave, that I do a nice thorough cleaning. I take out the trash, and I mop the floors and I vacuum and all that good stuff. So, I'm being responsible, and I'm being tidy, and I'm doing this for everybody, because up to this point, this is the first time the apartment's been cleaned since we lived there. And it wasn't filthy, it wasn't like dirty, but it was one of those things where, you can start noticing that there was dust settling on things. So it was time for its first big cleaning. So I went and I did a nice clean to, take care of the place, because, it's not my place, I'm renting it or whatever. And I want to make sure I don't get in trouble. I don't want to have to worry about the school getting in trouble for anything, not being the way it was when we moved in. So I'm taking care of it. And then the girls come back home later in the evening when they're done with classes, and they walk in, and they instantly notice I cleaned it, because, they can smell all of the cleaning products and stuff. So they instantly know that I cleaned. And I remember they made this very condescending remark, and they're like, so basically I think it was M. She was like, "Look who finally cleaned the place." And I'm sitting here like, what? I didn't say anything to them. I'm just thinking to myself, what do you mean finally clean the place? We all live here. None of you have done anything when it comes to cleaning outside of taking out your trash in the bathroom. And that is it. They had, and their area was dirty. Like they had all kinds of stuff all over in their bathroom that needed that needed to be thrown away. They just had trash scattered in their bathroom and stuff. It was just nasty, and I didn't even bother with their area, right? So their area was filthy, all right. And they had the nerve and the gall to tell me, oh, look who finally cleaned around here. And when they're the dirty ones and they haven't done anything. So it just really, really upset me. I didn't say anything to them because, once again, I'm trying to keep the peace. So I don't really talk to them at all. All right. And I really have, been trying to be polite, and I limit my interactions with them so that way they won't have an issue with me. But for some reason, they have issues with me. And I don't know, to this day, I don't know why they had issues with me. Because I wasn't a terrible roommate. I was quiet. They were the ones that were always, blasting music or, having friends over or whatever. I only had friends over on 3 occasions the entire time I was there for I think I was there for maybe less than 6. And in that 6 months time, I maybe had friends over on 3 occasions, and it was always a solitary friend. I never brought more than one friend over at a time, where they would bring them over in groups. So I was always, I saw it as I was being a good roommate. I was never disruptive or anything like that. So I had that little altercation that really rubbed me the wrong way about how they basically treat it like I'm the one that's supposed to be keeping the place clean, I guess. That's my place. So, and that really bothered me. The next time that really bothered me is I invited my high school boyfriend, because remember, we're in college, so I was still dating my high school boyfriend at the time, and he was going to school in Ripon, Wisconsin, and I'm over here in Schaumburg, Illinois. So that's a good maybe 4 or 5 hour drive away. Okay, so I invited him because we ended up having school break. I invited him to come over and hang out with me for a day or whatever. So I drove up there super early, picked him up so he can come spend the day with me, and then I would take him back. So I have him there and we're hanging out. I'm actually using the living room, which I hadn't used at all this entire time I lived there, because the other girls were always there. But now that I had somebody over, we were actually using the living room, and we were watching TV or whatever, and everything was fine. And then he leaves. I go and I take him back. And again, when I come home, the girls once again ambush me as a group, having a problem with me having my boyfriend over. And I'm sitting here why can't I have my boyfriend over? And it was harmless. We literally came in and we sat in the living room, and we didn't even sit on the same furniture. He sat at a chair and I was on the sofa. We didn't, it was completely innocent. He was just basically a guest. All right, and they had an issue with me bringing my boyfriend over, and I was like, these bitches. It's one of those things where they can do whatever they want, use all my stuff. I don't say a thing, but if I do anything, they have a problem with everything I do, and it's always ridiculous. There's no reason for them to have an issue with it. So that happened, and so I just shrug it off. I'm like, whatever. So, anyways, some more time goes by. Eventually, I end up breaking up with him because we just wasn't feeling it, didn't want to be in the relationship or whatever. And it was never really that big of a serious relationship. It was a high school relationship. We hadn't done anything. As far as we got was holding hands, and that was it. Okay? It wasn't that big of a serious relationship. Anyway, so I ended up breaking it off, and some time goes by. And then, I end up becoming friends with Joel, because I ended up meeting him in school, right? So he's in some of my gen ed classes, and we ended up just becoming really, we're just friends at this point. And so, he always had to wait for his dad to come pick him up after school to take him back home, because he was still living with his parents, but he couldn't get a ride home until his dad got done with work. So even if his classes got done at, say, 3 in the afternoon, his dad wasn't going to be picking him up until 7 or 8 in the evening, when he got done with work and stuff. And his dad worked in the city of Chicago, and we were over in the suburbs. So he would have to, make a longer commute to come to the school to pick him up. So since our classes got done so early, and he had nothing to do but sit at school for several hours waiting for his dad to pick him up, me being a nice person, I was like, you know what, why don't you come hang out with me? So we would go and we would spend time, just walking around, the block and stuff around between the apartment and the school. And the school was actually within walking distance of my apartment, which was pretty nice. So we would just we would go on walks, or we would go to like the bookstore and hang out, or we would go and I'm trying to think of things that we would do. We would go to like a department store, you know, or whatever, like Walmart or Meijer or whatever, and we would just kind of walk around, look at stuff, and just talk and hang out, you know, just kill time. And then the one time I was like, you know what, because the weather wasn't really good, it was kind of rainy, so we walked to my apartment, and I let him come in, and we were hanging out. So we were in the living room. This is like the second time I'm using my living room. And he and I are watching TV. I ended up introducing him to a show called Andromeda. It's a sci-fi starring Kevin Sorbo, and it was one of my favorite shows at the time. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, so I really loved it. And I kept talking to him about it, about how it was my favorite show that I was watching at the time, and he had never heard of it, but he was a fan of Kevin Sorbo, because you remember, you know, watching, you know, him in Hercules or whatever growing up. So he was interested, and he likes sci-fi stuff. So he was like, you know what, why don't I come over and you show me the show and we check it out. So I was like, cool, yeah, come on over, watch Andromeda, we'll check it out. And so we're watching Andromeda, everything's going great, and then it gets to the point where it's getting later, so, you know, he goes and he leaves, so he walks back to the school so his dad can pick him up or what have you. And the girls again, when he left, approached me having an issue with me being in the living room. They're like, I'm trying to remember exactly how they worded it. Remember, this is like over a decade ago. It's been a while since I've gone to school. So they approached me upset that I had taken up the living room. They said that this was, you know, basically a public space. Everybody should be able to use it and feel welcome. And they, you know, wanted to use the TV and whatever, but I was using it. And literally, like I said, this is only the second time I've used the living room. And this entire time I've been living there, I let them have free roam and I never go in there. So they're basically, now that I'm using it, they all of a sudden have a problem because now they can't use it for one afternoon. You know, big flipping deal. And they told me next time I have to ask them in case others want to use it first. And I was like, hold up. You're telling me I have to ask you permission to come into the living room, which you said is public space, and ask permission to use my own TV and watch my own DVDs? And I was irate. I was so mad. Now, I didn't blow up at them because, like I said, it wasn't me. I kept to myself. Clearly I was upset. I didn't say anything to them, but I ended up, you know, calling out my friends to vent or whatever, and I told Joel about it. And I was like, and he was like, wait a minute, what? He's like, we didn't do anything wrong. We were just watching a TV show, and it was your DVD player, your TV, and your DVD. Why do you have to ask them if it's okay if you watch it? And I was like, I know. I don't know why I don't know why they all of a sudden or feel entitled to demand that I have to ask permission to use my own stuff. But yeah, they had a problem with it. So I was mad. So I didn't say a word to them, but I figured, you know what? Instead of confronting them and having a possible argument, I figured, you know what? I'll make it quite clear how I feel about this, right? So I went the next day when they were in class. I went and I unhooked all my stuff. I was like, oh, you want me to ask permission to use my stuff, right? Well, guess what? Your privileges are now gone. So I went and I disconnected the TV and the DVD player, and I went ahead and, you know, and basically put the stuff away. So like I put the TV in the corner in like the room unhooked up, so it was in my room, and I packed up DVD player back in like the plastic tote that I brought it in when I moved in. So I packed all my stuff. I packed the stuff up. I was like, okay. That was my way of retaliating to them being, you know, entitled and rude, telling me I can't use my stuff and I have to ask permission. So I went, I was like, okay, well then you can't use my stuff. I'm packing it up. No one's using it. So they come back and they see that the stuff is packed up. And I remember they just looked and they were talking amongst themselves, and they didn't say anything to me. They didn't say anything to me about it. I basically was like, yeah, I'm packing up my stuff because I'm looking to, move out. Because at this point, I was fed up with these people. All right, I was just fed up with them. They just, like I said, they always alienated me, and they didn't treat me right, and I never did anything to them to provoke them in any way. I always stayed as friendly and peaceful as possible, and I never had any confrontations that I brought up to them ever. Usually, they would come to me with their gripes, and I would just say okay, and that was that. We never had actual arguments or fights or anything. They would just complain about something, and I would just be like, okay, fine, and that was it. So I packed up my stuff. So then they decided, okay, well, if we're not going to have a TV or anything, then we're going to have to find another way for entertainment. So they end up inviting a bunch of guys over. All right, and they're having their little party or whatever. And I'm so over here. Now it's getting late, and I'm trying to get some sleep because I have classes in the morning. And they're over here, being really loud and throwing a small little group party in the living room. So it's the 3 girls, and then they have a couple guy friends over, and they're drinking and all this. And I know for a fact they're all underage. All right. I think the oldest one there was maybe 20, maybe just turned 20, and the rest of us were all between 18 and 19. So we were technically legally, we were all underage, and they're all drinking alcohol, and I did not drink. To this day, I do not drink alcohol. And I remembered, I was like, I'm sitting here trying to sleep, and they're making all this noise, and they're drinking beer and all this stuff, and I'm sitting here thinking, you guys are gonna, I'm getting scared, because I'm like, what if someone, reports a noise complaint, and the police come over or something, and I'm just starting to freak out because, I'm just a teenager, and I'm not used to, I'm the kind of person that likes to follow the rules to the T, and we were told, no underage drinking, no parties, none of that were allowed, and here they are having a party, making a lot of noise, and they had underage drinking, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, someone's going to call the police, and they're going to find out there's underage drinking, and then I might get, thrown in jail because I'm, in the place while it's happening. They might see me as an accomplice or something, even though I had no part in it, and I was freaking out, and I'm just sitting there like, just upset, and I didn't say anything to them once again. So I'm sitting here freaking out about how, the possibilities of us breaking that they're breaking these rules, and the possibilities that authorities might get brought into it or whatever, and I don't want to get in trouble. So, but I'm just trying to keep to myself and stay under the radar and not draw attention to where I'm going to upset them or anything. And then I can hear them talking about me, because everybody in the apartment is out there having the party except for me. I'm in the room by myself trying to sleep. And I can hear them talking about me and making fun of me and stuff. And one of the guys, he's already drunk. He decides to open up the bedroom door and just start like, goofing off and kind of like making fun of me or whatever. Like, the lights are off. It's pitch black dark. You can't really, it's pitch black dark in the room, but so I'm just listening to him, basically just be immature and poke fun at me or whatever, while the girls are in the other room laughing about how he's, doing it or whatever. And then he closes the door and I go back to I'm just sitting here thinking, you people are so rude. Why, and you're being mean and you're harassing me, and I'm not doing anything, you guys. I leave you all alone. I let and it just made me really, really upset. So then I went, because I was already making plans to move out. I was looking at getting a different apartment on my own and paying my own way and not having to deal with roommates, because I was just tired of them. It was very mentally and emotionally draining having to deal with people that didn't want me there, that treated me differently from the group, and I just didn't feel like I belonged in my own place that I was living in. So I was working on getting my way out. So I figured, you know what, since I'm leaving, I'm going to report them while I'm at it, as my way of kind of getting back at them for being, jerks. So I went to Monash and I was like, hey, I'm moving out. I don't like living with them. And, I have, they're not very nice, and they were having a party and they were doing underage drinking, and I don't want to get in trouble. If they were to get caught or something was to happen, I don't want to be involved in that. So I'm separating myself and I'm moving out because I don't want to be around that. and so I reported it. I don't even think he did anything, honestly, because I figure if he had done something, they would have came at me or whatever and retaliated or had words or something. Nothing was ever brought up, so I feel like I reported it and he just didn't do anything, but it's whatever. So I'm moving out, and so I end up packing up my things and leaving, and I pack up my dishes and my electronics and all my stuff, and I'm moving out. And then I remember, like, after I'm all moved out, I think like a day or two later, M comes up to me and she's throwing a fit about how I took her dishes. And I'm like, I didn't take your plates, I took my plates. And she kept throwing a fit about how I stole her stuff. And I was like, no, those were mine. I brought plates. And yes, she did eventually buy her own plates, but they were, you could tell the difference. Like, they were completely different plate sets. They didn't match. But anyway, so she was throwing a fit, claiming I stole her stuff. And she had basically riled up the other two girls, making them believe that I was a thief. And I literally didn't take her stuff. I honestly did not take her stuff. I just took my plates and I left their stuff there. But she was making the thing about it. So I, being me and not wanting any kind of confrontation, I just gave in and I packed up the plates that were mine. My mom gifted them to me. I packed up my plates and I went to the apartment, and they had like the patio, like we were on the second floor, so they had like the sliding door open, so I could hear them up there, making noise or whatever. So I called up to them because I didn't have access to get into the apartment anymore. I had moved out. I didn't have the key to get into the lobby to go upstairs. So I shouted to them through the balcony, letting them know that I was out there, and they saw me holding the box. And I basically said, hey, I got something for M. And so she basically, came out to take the box or whatever. And then she said, thank you for returning my stuff that you took. And I was like, whatever. Like, it was my stuff. I'm literally now gifting you my property just to shut you up at this point. Because like I said, I don't want confrontation. I'm just there. All I want is to just go to school and mind my own business and just get through my classes so I can go out in my life. I'm not looking to create enemies or start fights. I just want to just go to school. And that's all I'm caring about. And I have these people in my life that are just making things harder than they need to be. So I just give her the dang plates, and then I end up going to Target. Afterwards, and I go buy new plates, and I get some new like bowls and stuff, since I gave her my stuff, because I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. So I went and bought new stuff, and that was basically the end of that roommate situation. I got them out of my damn life. It's just, they were horrible people. They were just mean and rude and inconsiderate, and yeah, so that was my first experience with roommates, and I hated it. Years later, Joel and I our relationship ends up developing to where we're dating, and it's at this point we have gotten to the point where we're actually living together now, and we were renting a house together, and we were no longer in school at this point. We each had our own, we each had full-time jobs, and we were just being, adults at this point. And he ends up making a friend at his place of work. He ended up working in the call center for Comcast, and so he ended up making a friend there named Rich. And Rich was kind of having a hard time, and Joel, wanting to be a good friend, wanted to help a friend out. So he's like, you know what, why don't you come live with Terry and I? We have an extra bedroom in the house we're renting that we don't use, that you can use it, and we can just divvy up the rent, so that way it'll be a lot cheaper for everybody and easier to manage them out. And he didn't really ask me about it, which has kind of bothered me, but he told me that he's helping a friend out, and I was like, what, fine, if you're helping a friend out, it's fine, we can make do. And so I let it happen, and I didn't. But I was definitely agitated because I already had a negative experience with roommates, so I never wanted to have roommates ever again. I wanted it to be my first and last time, and so now he brought in somebody else that I didn't even know. I didn't know him. He was Joel's friend. I didn't know him. I knew of him by name because Joel would speak of him, but I never really met him or knew him. So now, to me, I had this stranger that was going to be living with us. So it made me uncomfortable, and it was our place, and so it was kind of like that situation. But I was a good person, and I don't want confrontation. So it's like, okay, if he needs help, fine, we'll help him or whatever, fine. So he becomes our roommates, and oh my gosh, this guy was just, it was another horrible experience. And so some of the things that ended up happening, now he mostly kept to himself, and he was usually a pretty nice, polite guy, so he already behaved a lot better than the girls did that I had lived with before, so I didn't really have too much issue with him. And he kept to himself, so he basically behaved the way I did with my roommate situation, where I let them have run of the place and I kind of just stayed in my corner. Well, he pretty much did that, where he let us, because he knew it was our house. He just kind of stayed in his room. He would come out in the kitchen every now and then, make food, and he'd wash dishes or whatever. So he was a good roommate, when it came to like that stuff. So I didn't really have any issues with it. But when it came to cleaning, he only did dishes, because he didn't use the rest of the house. So he only, he was just in his bedroom, or he would use the bathroom or whatever. And so like his bedroom was really nasty, and when I say nasty, like I mean like super nasty. Like he had literal like gunk and crud like on his tables and smeared all over his laptop, and it was just really gross. And he just had like everything was dirty dishes and rotting food and dirty laundry, and like basically you think of like a horror story of like a bachelor pad. That was his room. It was just it was disgusting. But I never said anything because it was his room, so to me, I didn't ever have to go in there, so I didn't really care. It bothered me, but at the point that it wasn't one of those things that affected me directly, since I never had to go in. So I let him have his space, and I didn't really tell him what to do. Well, anyways, I remember at the time I had pet ferrets, and I ended up wanting to get them some toys so they could play and stuff, because I like letting them run around so they're not always in their cage all the time. So I ended up getting them this little, like, basically like this little toy, like, ball pit for them. So imagine, how like, if you go, how like kids have like those big ball pits, if you were to go to like the play area for, let's say, like a fast food place, and they would have like those ball pits the kids could jump in and whatnot. So think of that on kind of smaller scale. So it was basically this round little, soft little blow up like swimming pool, like a tiny one. And it came with a bunch of balls or whatever that you put in there, so that the ferrets could jump in and they could play around and stuff. They like to toss and kick them around and, have fun. Ferrets are very, very playful. So they're over here playing with their toys, and, they end up, kicking some of the balls out of the little pit. So there's some balls or whatever rolling around in the living room. And Rich all of a sudden just comes out of his room and he throws a complete temper tantrum about how he can't take it, how the house is a mess, because there's these, little plastic colorful balls on the floor, and he's freaking out about how the house is a disaster. And I'm like, the house is clean. Literally, the house is clean, except for some colored balls on the floor. And, where his room literally looks like, someone was squatting in there, and it was, being tore apart. And it was like, I'm just sitting here like, this guy's a contradiction. Okay? But anyways, he's throwing a huge temper tantrum. He's shouting and huffing and puffing about how he can't take it, and the place is a wreck, and whatever. And we're just sitting here like, what is your problem? The house is not a wreck, it's clean. And, we're going to clean them up when they're done playing. They're just playing. Imagine, living in a place, let's say you were a roommate to somebody who had, let's say, like a toddler, and they kept the house pretty clean. But, kids are, going to scatter toys around, and when they're done playing, you just kind of put them away, or attempt to put them away or whatever. So basically, he was freaking out because there were toys on the floor. And I'm like, you kidding me right now? They're just playing, and we're going to clean the toys up when they're done playing. It's not that big of a deal. And he was just flying off the handle about how the house was a mess. And we were just like, you need to calm down. So that ended up happening. So we're like, whatever. He ended up apologizing the next day or whatever. So we're just like, okay, I guess he was just having a mental break. Whatever. He ended up buying himself a car, and he ended up getting himself like this Mazda something or other. and he ended up buying this car, and he was having some hard stuff with finances. And so, long story short, he wasn't able to pay for his bills for the car, so that car ended up getting repoed. So me being a good friend, I'm like, you know what, you're hard up, you really need transportation, because I can't be driving you all to work and everything, because I have to go to work and do my own thing. So I went ahead and I fronted the money so we could go and get him a used car. So I went and I bought him a used car to help him out. A friend in need, I was like, here, got you a car, pay me back, and just make sure you pay for the car. So I paid for the down payment and whatever, and because he went with me, I put the money down, put everything in his name or whatever, so he could pay for his stuff. And then he didn't pay for that either. He didn't pay me back. He didn't pay his for that car, and so that car also ended up getting repoed. And I'm just like, wow. Here I am trying to be a good friend, help him out, and he just treated like he didn't care. He didn't care. Literally, the guy came to repo it, and we told him, hey, they're repoing your car, and he just kind of shrugged off, he's like, okay, whatever. And he just stayed there. He didn't care. And I was like, you serious? I helped you get this, and you don't care? That's part of my investment too. You're just gonna throw it away. You're not gonna, take action and you give them some money or something. And so I was really, really upset. So so I was like, fine. I'm not gonna help you like that. I'm not gonna help you out like that ever again, because clearly you're not going to care and appreciate it, and what have you. So that happened. Things ended up getting worse, really, really worse. And we didn't know. He was hiding it from us at the time. And we didn't know that he was we didn't know that he was not only using heroin, but he was also selling it out of our house. And he was keeping it a secret. Occasionally he would, just go outside or whatever, and he would have a friend or whatever come out. And he would, I guess he would sell stuff, but he didn't do it very often to where we would notice a pattern. It was rarely. Most of the time, I think he was using his vehicle to drive out and meet somewhere in a parking lot and do his sale or whatever and come back, so we didn't know he was doing it. But now that he didn't have a car, every now and then he would just make these random trips up to the front yard and then come right back. We were getting suspicious of his behavior. And so when he was gone one day, we decided to go into his room and look around and see what the hell's going on. And then we found all these syringes and needles and heroin in there. And we were like, oh, the hell no. This is our home. Last thing we want is to go down for drug charges and stuff. So we ended up kicking him out. Yeah, Joel and I were mad when we found out that not only was he using drugs in our home, he was also selling drugs out of our home. We ended up, and what led us to searching his room wasn't just being suspicious. He had actually gotten arrested. And he had called us to bail him out for getting arrested for being in possession and attempting to sell heroin. And it just blew us away. What do you mean? So he told us to go into his room and find his stuff and throw it away. So we had gone into his room to find it. And so, yeah, we ended up throwing the stuff away, but then we ended up kicking him out, too, because we were like, no, dude, this is serious. We do not want this kind of drama in our life. We do not want to potentially, get a felony because you're doing illegal activity out of our home. No. So we ended up kicking him out. We're like, no, you're on your own, dude. We want no part of this. So that was the end of that. And so, yeah, so no. Now, there was another event that had transpired with Rich as a roommate, and there was a moment when he had approached Joel and I and asked if he could get his own pet. He had asked permission, so he approached us and said, hey, I would like to get myself a kitten. Would that be okay? And Joel and I, we discussed it. We were concerned because we had ferrets, so we didn't want an adult cat or anything that hadn't been around them before, because we didn't want them to get hurt. And so Rich insisted that he was just going to get a kitten and everything would be fine. So Joel and I were like, okay, that's a kitten, fine. They'll be playful. They're not going to hurt the ferrets. And, Joel and I are big animal people, so we were okay with it. So Rich leaves to go and get his new kitten. And then later on, he comes home to show us, hey guys, I got my new pet. So Joel and I go to the kitchen because he put him on the cat carrier on the countertop to show us what he got. And, he looked hesitant, like something was up. He opens up the cat carrier and, there's no kitten in this cat carrier. Instead, there are 2 full-grown cats in the carrier. And we're like, what happened? And he said, I don't know, man. I went there and I talked to him about how I wanted a kitten. And they said that this was a kitten, that these were kittens, and that they were brother and sister, and they can't be separated. And so I had to take them both. And I don't know what to do. So he took them. And so now we have 2 adult-sized cats, and named Oreo and Donovan. We ended up just shorthanding his name to Donnie because Donovan was just a bit much to always have to say. So we just called him Donnie. So he had these 2 cats, and we were a little worried at first. So we introduced them, slowly and safely to the ferrets. Letting the ferrets, keeping the cats in the cat carrier and letting the ferrets kind of sniff out and go around the cat carrier so the cats can kind of see them and they would be safe. And then we slowly, introduced them to each other to see how the cats would behave around them. And everything worked out great. The cats were friendly. They didn't harm the ferrets. They would play together and it was good. So it didn't become that big of an issue. But later on, when he ended up having some temper tantrums on occasion, and it ties into what I had said earlier about how we found out. So this is kind of like out of order. I had said how we had to kick him out and all that stuff because of heroin and whatever. So him having his outlashes and his outbursts, I feel like has to do with him going through issues with, maybe he's not able to sell his stuff and he's having money problems and maybe and things like that. So he's just having, acting out because of all his stress and his drugs and stuff. Well, anyways, he ends up having a fit, and he ended up taking Oreo and tossing her against the wall. And Joel and I were like, no. We are big animal lovers. We do not tolerate that stuff. So we chewed him out and we were like, don't you ever do that again. Because that was serious. We do not tolerate that. So we ended up having to yell at him for abusing his cat. And Oreo is a little sweetheart. Okay? So we were very upset. So then later on, when we ended up having to evict him and kick him out, we packed up all his stuff and we tossed it in the garage and basically contacted his family and be like, hey, take his crap or we're tossing it out, sort of thing, because he's locked up in jail. He's not going to be getting it. And we want it out. We want nothing to do with him. And we told him that we're keeping the cats. Because at that point, we're like, this guy isn't going to be taking care of him. He's in jail. And he wasn't really good to them anyway, abusing Oreo and whatnot. So we're like, no, they were better off staying with us. So that's actually a little story on how Joel and I ended up getting our cats, Oreo and Donnie at the time, was we ended up just keeping them ourselves after we kicked Rich out. So that ended up occurring there. So yeah, he was just not a good roommate, not a good person either, and it ended up being a very, very toxic environment and relationship having him around. It created a lot of drama and stress. So yeah, eventually it got to the point where enough was enough and we had to sever ties and move on because it was like, no. So, roommates for me has always been a terrible, terrible experience. I never want roommates again. So those are little stories of the times I've had roommates, and they were definitely negative. Never want to do it again. Hopefully you all that have had roommates have had way better positive experiences, but I have not. So thank you all so very, very much for listening to me tell my story about my terrible roommates. Make sure you hit that follow. Go ahead and tell your friends and family. Share it out. I would love to have as much support as possible for the podcast. If you end up enjoying it, please share it with those that you know. It helps me out. I appreciate you all so much. You can check me out on Twitter, Instagram. Get in touch with me. I have Discord. You can go watch me stream live on Twitch. Just search Cool Cat Terry. You can find me all over social media. You guys are all amazing. Thank you so very much for listening in. I really do appreciate it. If you have any comments, you can message me here on Anchor, or you can send me a DM on Twitter, or come to my stream and talk to me. I'd love to hear about you, what you think about any of the episodes you have heard so far. Leave some comments, and hopefully you guys check out the next one when we come back. Thanks again, and you all have a great one.